This is Populations and Resources, Lesson 3.2, Activity 2, Part 2. You should have completed the rereading of the competition for food section and answer the question at the bottom here. If you haven't done that, make sure you go back and do that before watching this video. So, what you should have learned in the article is that the relationship between sardines and jellies is that they eat the same food. So you can see here in this food web diagram that both of these arrows are going to the sardines and the jellies, so that means that the energy storage molecules from the zooplankton go to both of these consumer populations. So these are both consumer populations, and this is their resource. So they share this resource population. You should have also learned that the sardines in the North Benguela decrease due to overfishing. So if there are fewer sardines, they will eat less of the zooplankton. So this leaves more zooplankton for the jellies. With more energy storage molecules from a larger zooplankton population, the jelly population can live longer and reproduce more, leading to more births than deaths, and the population will increase. Well, I don't know if jellies have brains that can really live longer, but anyways, you guys know what I mean. They can reproduce more because they live longer, they have more energy storage molecules to reproduce more, and so then there'll be more births and deaths, and the jelly population can increase. So this article gave us information about how a population in an ecosystem can change the size of another population even though it is not its consumer or resource population. So that's the investigation question, is how or what can affect the size of a population besides its resource or consumer. So in this case, another population that shares the same resource population can have an effect on the other consumer population. So leads us to the idea of competition. And the relationship between sardines and jellies is an example of competition because they both get their energy storage molecules by eating members of the same resource population. When we're talking about competition in this class, we may use the word compete. For example, lions and hyenas compete for zebras. So outside of the ecosystem context, you might think of competition in different ways. So sports teams compete against one another and try to win games. But when an ecologist says competition, they do not mean that organisms are physically fighting one another. It simply means they use the same resource, like eating the same food or living in the same territory. And in this class, we will focus on competition for food. So here's a definition for competition. So now we're going to talk about indirect effect. So first, a direct effect is when one thing leads to another. For example, when an increase in a resource population leads to an increase in its consumer population. An indirect effect is when one thing leads to another, and that change leads to yet another effect. For example, when populations compete for the same resource population, a change in size to one competing population affects the size of the resource population. Then that change to the resource population leads to a change in the other competing population. If I go back to this diagram, we can see an indirect effect here. So this population changes, which is the cause, and that has the effect of less zooplankton being eaten by sardines. So its effect by this population going down, the effect is that this population increases. And then this, because this increases, there's an indirect effect of this also increasing because now there's more energy storage molecules for the jellies because the zooplankton population increased. And that's what we mean by indirect effect. The cause is the sardine population went down. That effect is that the zooplankton population increased. Therefore, an indirect effect of the jellies increases. Make sure you press hand in when you're done.